Kui Gar Nervod. I am Tad Larkin, the lore master of Manda-LORE, and today I'll be digging through the archives to continue elaborating on the history of the galaxy.
Where we last left off in this lecture series, we saw the extragalactic Yuuzhan Vong begin their invasion of the galaxy, subjugating and transforming many worlds and killing and displacing trillions, the reaction of the Jedi and the opposition they faced at the hands of the invaders as well as the Peace Brigade, and the fall of Coruscant. We also saw the restructuring of the New Republic into the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, the Jedi's efforts to locate Zonama Seacot, and the recapture of Coruscant, ending the Yuuzhan Vong War with the subsequent Dark Nest Crisis and Swarm War ensuing afterward. The 10 years following the end of the Yuuzhan Vong War were spent coordinating efforts to rebuild the galaxy and rehome displaced populations. A new Jedi Academy was built within the ruins of the old Jedi Library on Ossus, and a new Jedi Temple was constructed atop the ruined foundations of the old one. And when Coruscant was for the most part reclaimed from the Vong forming that had briefly transformed it into Yuuzhan Tar, the Galactic Alliance capital was moved back from its temporary location on Denon to Coruscant. During the Swarm War, which we covered in the last transmission, Jacen Solo went on a crucial mission to Hapes to secure the aid of the Hapan Royal Navy, meeting with his fellow Jedi Academy alumni and longtime crush, Queen Mother Tenel Ka-Jo, who invited the Jedi Knight to her chambers. Tenel Ka used the Force to conceal her pregnancy before giving birth to their daughter Allana in 36 ABY. Unlike the old Jedi Order, Luke's new Jedi Order were permitted to marry and have children. However, Allana's parentage needed to be kept a secret, as Jacen was not from any Hapan royal families, nor betrothed to the Queen Mother. The already scandalous situation was only made more intense by an assassination attempt on Allana's life by one of the rival nobles, and it was agreed that even Allana would not be allowed to know that Jacen was her true father, to protect her and her status as the Chun Da, or the heir apparent of the Hapes Consortium. The years following the Swarm War were marked by unprecedented economic growth on the way to recovery, as many thousands of worlds were still working to reclaim their ecologies from the Yuuzhan Vong biotech that ravaged much of the galaxy. However, some star systems seemed to receive more aid and more special attention from the Galactic Alliance than others, causing growing resentments from those still suffering on Vong-formed worlds. Still, others were untouched by the Yuuzhan Vong, or happened to defend themselves better than most, such as were the cases with the corporate sector, who had the strongest post-war economy, and the Five Worlds government of the Corellia system. The Galactic Alliance heavily relied on Corellia's resources to help reclaim Coruscant, as well as much of the worlds in the core, and Corellia was given no reward nor special commendation for her aid. Instead, the system, along with many others within the GA, would find its power to both govern and defend itself limited by newly passed legislation. The Sector Defense Limit Act of 37 ABY not only restricted the size of planetary defense forces of member worlds, but also their ability to strike trade agreements and defense contracts, all while demanding a quota of certain amount of arms, munitions, and vessels to be contributed to the GA Defense Force, based on a member world's GDP. It felt like the Ruzan reformations all over again, but worse. Ironically, the legislation designed to curtail any government's ability to usurp power and become another empire was being used to criticize and accuse the GA of hoarding military resources for itself to do just that. Other governments, like the Hutts and the Mandalorians, who were already fiercely independent by this point and still in a period of reconstruction after the Vong War, were further deterred from joining the Galactic Alliance. In defiance of the sector defense limit, the Corellian Five Worlds government began constructing a secret fleet, as well as restarting efforts to rearm Centerpoint Station, and even engaged in an arms trade with Adumar that caught the Galactic Alliance's attention. While all of this was ongoing, Lumaya, the self-stylized Dark Lady of the Sith, had spent decades preparing and scheming to get revenge on Luke Skywalker, as well as bring down the new Jedi Order. And this turn of galactic events created the perfect flashpoint where she can manipulate events to serve her purposes. Lumaya had always seen herself as the continuation of the lineage of the Bay Knight Sith, and she was drawn to an old asteroid mine near the Bamil system where she learned advanced Force techniques from the Sith spirit of Darth Vectivus, a supposed benevolent Sith Lord who used to own the company that mined the asteroid thousands of years prior. It is here where she would set up her base of operations. Another Sith sect at this time was secretly gaining traction. A former Jedi and Order 66 survivor, Sharad Het, who had passed time as a bounty hunter before being captured and tortured by the Yuuzhan Vong and overseen by Vergere, had started his own Sith order on Korriban, the One Sith, dubbing himself Darth Krayt. Krayt sought to improve upon Darth Bane's rule of two, and declared that only one Lord of the Sith would contain all of the power and mastery of the Sith forever, while many lesser Sith Lords did his bidding, culminating in the rule of one. Lumaya was invited to join the One Sith, but ultimately declined. Krayt would periodically go in and out of a stasis chamber as he sought the secret to immortality as well as a cure for his Vong implant slowly killing him. In 40 ABY, after uncovering the Adumari arms agreement as well as the plot to rearm Centerpoint Station, the Galactic Alliance escalated the situation by launching a Jedi-led multi-team precision operation against Corellia, while the GA's Second Fleet under Admiral Kloskin maintained orbit as a show of force. Jacen Solo and the now adolescent Jedi apprentice Ben Skywalker were tasked with taking out Centerpoint Station. And while Jacen dealt with his estranged second cousin, now Corellian President Thraken Sal Solo, Ben negotiated with a giant droid imprinted with the deceased Anakin Solo's DNA, which was the only way anyone could interact with the station, and he convinced it to self-destruct, not before locking the Corellians out of all of the controls, bringing them back to square one with rearming Centerpoint Station. While the Centerpoint mission was a success, the second most important objective, tasked to Jaina Solo and Zek, failed spectacularly when their attempt to kidnap the Five Worlds Prime Minister Adel Saxon was predicted, and they found a protocol droid holding a bomb instead of the Prime Minister in her speeder motorcade. The fleet operation didn't go as smoothly as anticipated either, as the Corellian fleet intercepted the GA fleet, conducting hostile maneuvers without firing shots, causing Kloskin, who was suffering a mental breakdown thanks to Lumaya using the Force to pose as the ghost of his deceased wife, withdrew the fleet to the edge of the system and occupied Trallis. With 1 out of 3 mission objectives secured and one of the 5 inhabited worlds under Galactic Alliance occupation, Corellia was forced to the negotiating table before this could break out into all-out war, and aboard Toriaz Station orbiting Kuat, dignitaries met along with their Jedi mediators. Following the first day of negotiations, Lumaya, posing as a Kuati noble, hired mercenaries to attack the delegation during the night, succeeding in killing Prime Minister Saxon and Grand Admiral Pellion's body double, and ending any hopes for a peaceful resolution. A parting gift was also left, an intricate work of beadcraft which spoke specifically to Jacen Solo in the Force. Saxon's vice chair and coincidentally her ex-husband, Denjax Templar, became the new Five Worlds Prime Minister, and Pellion stepped down as Supreme Commander of the Galactic Alliance Defense Force, and was succeeded by Mon Calamari Admiral Cha Nyathal, while Jacen headed the investigation into the attack, using the beadwork he found as his primary clue. Jacen's search for meaning in the beadcraft brought him into contact with many academics on many worlds, who were able to decipher all but one of the tassels, leading to someone who could supposedly translate it on the planet Lord, where he and Ben met up with Jedi Knight Nilani Din. On Lord, Ben found the shuttle that was seen leaving Toriaz Station the night of the attack, and was approached by the owner, Brisha Sayo, an anagram of Lumaya's true identity, Shira Bree, and she lured the Jedi back into her asteroid base near Bamil. After separating the 3 Jedi and fighting Force Phantoms of dark side versions of Luke, Mara Jade, and Leia, Brisha revealed herself to Jacen, and showed him visions of the coming war and the destruction it would reap upon the galaxy, and only Jacen, if he accepted her teachings, could stop it. Wanting a better galaxy for his daughter to grow up in, and convinced that he could be a benevolent Sith Lord like Vectivus supposedly was, Jacen agreed, murdered Nilani Din, and rubbed Ben's memory with the Force, as he did when he was a child and accidentally discovered his and Tenel Ka's secret. Meanwhile, Corellian forces, with the aid of the newly ripped from retirement Wedge Antilles and Han and Leia Organa Solo, who found themselves aiding the Corellians, managed to retake Tralis from the occupying Galactic Alliance forces. The Second Galactic Civil War had begun. As Supreme Commander Niathal made preparations for a full blockade of the entire Corellia star system, Jacen was offered the commanding position of Colonel within the newly created Galactic Alliance Guard, formed in the wake of several Corellian terrorist attacks in Galactic City, echoing the Separatist terror attacks carried out during the Clone Wars, and he was given a flagship, the modified Imperial II class Star Destroyer he named the Anakin Solo. Much to the chagrin of his Jedi Grandmaster father, 13-year-old Ben Skywalker joined the GAG as well, and assisted his cousin in raids on Corellian apartments and breaking up riots. Solo was grooming the young Skywalker to one day be his Sith apprentice. Colonel Solo would unintentionally make a powerful enemy when he killed Aelin Vel, the daughter of famous bounty hunter and current Manda-LORE of the Mandalorians Boba Fett, during an intense interrogation after it was discovered that she was hired by a Corellian terror cell, which greatly displeased the Manda-LORE, who was searching for her along with his granddaughter Mirta Gev. Han and Leia Solo, meanwhile, no longer welcome in either Corellia or the GA given that Thraken Sal Solo had put a bounty on their heads, were approached by an individual with a rival political party, Dur Gedgen, to assassinate Sal Solo, and they received some unlikely help. Fett and Mirta helped take out the Corellian president in exchange for them convincing Jacen to release Aelin, who they had not yet known was dead. Back on Coruscant, Jacen sought to utilize the still-active world brain that he had befriended during his captivity on Coruscant by the Yuuzhan Vong to help him spy on suspected terror cells. However, much to his dismay, the Duryam was killed with a blow dart by an unseen assailant. Alima Rar had survived the Battle of Tanupe, and was trying to restart the Gorog nest as well as kill Jacen Solo in revenge for what Leia had done to her. However, she altered her plans when she noticed that Jacen was working with Lumaya, and later allied herself with the Dark Lady of the Sith. Seeking more allies as the war grew, the Five Worlds government began working with a rival Hapan noble house to oust Tenel Ka and bring the Hapes Consortium over to their side, using an unsuspecting Han and Leia Solo as bait, while the assassin, the long-thought-dead Aurra Sing, did the dirty work. The coup did not go as planned, and the Solos, Hapans, and the Jedi got to the bottom of the situation, culminating in the Battle of Hapes, where the GA-backed Hapan loyalists under Tenel Ka crushed the Corellian-backed Hapan usurper fleet. Alima Rar wasn't the only survival of the Battle of Tanupe. Jagged Fel, now exiled from the Chiss Ascendancy following the Swarm War, thought to regain his family's honor by hunting down and killing Rar before she could restart the Gorog nest, and he approached the Solos and Skywalkers, who gave him command of a task force consisting of himself, Jaina, and Zek to hunt her down. In an effort to learn more about whoever was pulling the strings of this conflict, since Luke suspected Lumaya after Jacen and Ben's report from Bamil, the Skywalkers, Solos, the Antilleses, and the Horns convinced Booster Terek to operate his captured Imperial Star Destroyer turned space casino, the Errant Venture, within the Corellian exclusion zone. Jag, Jaina, and Zek also went to the Errant Venture, where they tracked down and encountered Alima Rar, who was trying to kill Han, Leia, Luke, and Mara. But she got away right as the Corellians launched a counterattack to break the Corellian blockade, where they hopped into their starfighters and protected the Errant Venture as she attempted to flee the battle. Fleets from Bothawi and Kaminor, who were in secret talks of an alliance with Corellia, jumped to their aid and helped them break the Galactic Alliance blockade, after which the Corellian Confederation was founded, and yet more worlds would soon leave the GA for the Confederation, including the key shipyard world of Fondor and the Tabana gas-producing world of Bespin. In a surprising move, even the Hutts, with their modern fleets built in the aftermath of the Yuuzhan Vong War, formally joined the Confederation, allying with an outside power for the first time in galactic history, and ramping up this small conflict into a truly galactic-scale war. Seeing Jacen heading down a dark path while in command of the Galactic Alliance Guard, Luke bade his son to return to the Jedi Temple to continue his training, but Ben would soon receive a special mission from his older cousin. He was to track down a special Sith amulet on one of the moons of Drua, which led him to tracking down a thief named Vasquez to the ancient Sith world of Ziost. Ben had no idea that Jacen was testing him to see if he'd make a good Sith apprentice, while mercenaries hired by Lumaya harried the young Jedi trainee. What they both didn't expect, however, was what Ben found. He, along with the late Vasquez's young daughter, found an ancient Sith meditation sphere, similar to what Naga Sadow had used, and he flew it to rendezvous with the Anakin Solo. Ben's heroic deeds convinced Jacen that he would not make a good Sith disciple. Eager to stop the growth of the Confederation, GA Intelligence had received information about a meeting aboard a pleasure space station orbiting Galactic 8, where top Confederation delegates were to meet to choose the new Supreme Commander of their armed forces, which Jacen chose as a prime opportunity to lay a trap. While Jacen and secretly Lumaya and Alima infiltrated the station to crash the delegation themselves, Niathal and her fleet would hide within the gas giant and spring their ambush at the opportune moment, while Jedi stealth X-Wings reconnoitered the situation. The meeting itself was a trap, and as a hologram of Tur Fanir, former 181st leader and the new Confederation Supreme Commander, laughed at Jacen, he was able to relay the information to Luke, who in turn warned Niathal about the minefields as he, Mara, and the Solos went to the station to rescue Jacen. Jacen was able to slip away to avoid his collusion with Lumaya to be detected, while she and Alima Rar duked it out with Luke, Mara, and Leia before the space station received heavy damage and they were all forced to flee. The Battle of Galactic 8 was a draw, though the Confederation would tout it as their first major victory since the breaking of the Corellian blockade. Reeling from her failure at Galactic 8, Niathal was able to snatch a victory at Bothui. However, it would by no means knock the Bothans out of the fight, and with 2 more worlds seceding and a rekindling of the Sepan Civil War, Chief of State Kal Omas's administration was struggling to hold the Galactic Alliance together. Seeking one last chance for a peaceful resolution, Omas agreed to a secret meeting with Corellian President Dur Gedjin on Volpter, where they discussed possible terms, some of which included the removal of Niathal and Solo from their positions. Little did they know, their supposedly clandestine meeting was bugged by GAG operatives, and the recording of the meeting was used to justify a coup, where both Jacen and Niathal installed themselves as temporary co-chiefs of state, ruling as a duumvirate. Gedjin was assassinated by a GAG team including Ben Skywalker soon after. Meanwhile, on the battle-scarred planet of Manda-LORE, a new vein of Beskar ore, the light-durable metal with lightsaber-resistant properties, was discovered, and Mandalore Boba Fett commissioned new starships, with which he secured a defense contract with the Verpine of Roche, who were having a territorial dispute with the GA member world Murkana. The Mandalorians were working their way back into being a galactic power, and just maybe, Fett would get his revenge on Jacen in the process. Ben's part in the Gedjin assassination and the subsequent loss of one of his friends in GAG caused him to become distraught, and in what would end up becoming the last time he saw his mother, confided in her about wanting to leave GAG for good and his reservations about his cousin. Mara would end up keeping a close eye on Jacen as she continued tracking down Lumaya after several previous encounters she and Luke had with her and Alima Rar, so it wasn't long before she discovered that Jacen was in league with Lumaya and set a trap for him on the Hapen world of Kavin, and their ferocious lightsaber duel in the tunnels of Kavin resulted in Mara losing her life at Jacen's hands. Jacen, in turn, completed a milestone of his Sith training, and chose a new name for himself, Darth Kaitis. With Jacen now a full-fledged Sith Lord in her eyes, Lumaya called Luke out in the Force, and believing that she had killed Mara, answered her call, and tracked her to Terraphon, where they dueled for a 5th and final time before the Jedi Grand Master, without vengeance or anger in his heart, beheaded the Dark Lady of the Sith. Mara was unable to relay her findings to her husband or her son before her death, so Kaitis, still masquerading as co-chief of state Jacen Solo, attended Mara's state funeral, and Mara's body became one with the Force just as Jacen entered the convocation, trying one last time to send a message that Jacen had done this, but Luke misconstrued this sign. Meanwhile, Han and Leia were prevented from attending by a GAG squad apprehending them in the Jedi Temple. With the Jedi Grand Master unreachable in his state of mourning, the rest of the Jedi continued to aid the Galactic Alliance in their war, participating in the disastrous Battle of Balmorra, which saw heavy losses on both sides, as well as the defense of the Kuat shipyards. However, when Luke learned of Jacen using his son to assassinate Cal Omas under house arrest, and a GAG squad holding the Jedi Academy on Ossus hostage to ensure the Jedi's cooperation, removed the order from the GA and broke off the defense of Kuat to head for Kashyyyk. In truth, Ben did not assassinate the former Chief of State, as Jacen had used crudely spliced recordings of Omas to make him believe that he had ordered the death of his mother. But even after this realization, Omas took his own life to help Ben's cover as well as save his family. Meanwhile, Zek, Jag, and Jaina were able to help the Jedi younglings, as well as Masters Cam and Tion Solusar, evacuate the Academy on Ossus, and regroup with the rest of the Jedi on a temporary base at Endor, before moving to Shedu Mod in the transitory mists surrounding the Hapes cluster. At Kashyyyk, the Solos managed to convince the Wookiees to aid the Jedi, but Darth Caedus demanded that the Wookiees hand over their fleet to the GA, and upon refusal, he proceeded to orbitally bombard the surface and watch as the Roshir trees burned. This drew in the forces of the Confederation to aid the Wookiees, as Caedus had hoped. What the Greenhorn Sith Lord expected to be a decisive engagement against the Corellians turned against him, when Queen Mother Tenel Ka and her Hapan fleet arrived. However, the Hapans had renounced their allegiance to the GA and joined the Jedi. His fleet was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and to make things worse, Luke himself boarded the Anakin Solo to both confront Caedus and rescue Ben, who had been held captive by the Sith following his own attempt to confront him for the death of his mother. Caedus and his fleet narrowly escaped the duel with Luke and the Battle of Kashyyyk, and as the Jedi aided the Wookiees in putting out forest fires, Caedus kidnapped his daughter to punish Tenel Ka and ransom her for Hape's return to the GA, and survived another Jedi ambush in the Undercity of Coruscant, led by Master Kyle Katarn, who barely survived the encounter. Darth Caedus would fall victim to yet another Corellian trap, when he was lured into false surrender talks during a meeting between two fleets in open space, when, rather than an ambush from another Confederation fleet like he was expecting, the Corellians fired Center Point Station after toiling for months to get it operational again, and destroyed almost all of the GA Second Fleet, but Caedus and the Anakin Solo managed to escape. The 5-year-old Alana was eventually rescued by Han and Leia Solo, who she revealed her parentage to after just learning herself, and Luke Skywalker led a Jedi-led coalition of various forces not aligned with either the Confederation or the GA to attack Center Point Station, destroying the troublesome installation once and for all. Meanwhile, Ali Marar was finally defeated by Jaina, Zek, and Jagged Fel aboard Lumaya's asteroid base near Bamil, and the asteroid itself was destroyed by a contingent of Darth Krayt's one Sith, to ensure that its secrets are never learned by the Jedi or any other Force users. By 41 ABY, it became apparent to Jaina, as well as her parents and the rest of the Jedi Order, that her brother could not be redeemed, and Jacen Solo was effectively dead. So, in order to prepare for an eventual face-off with Darth Caedus, she traveled to Manda-LORE to train with Boba Fett, Goran Baveen, and other Mandalorian supercommandos to get an edge on her brother, who otherwise knew all of her moves and techniques. The major turning point in the Second Galactic Civil War came at the disastrous Battle of Fondor, where Caedus had wrangled Pelion and the Imperial Remnant, who until this point sat out the conflict, to help take Fondor and capture the vital shipyards there. But after Fondor surrendered, Caedus ignored all of the calls for ceasefires and kept up the attack. Admiral Niathal wasn't okay with bombarding civilian centers, especially after the planet had already surrendered, and broke away from Caedus' fleet to attack those still loyal to him, and Pelion himself was about to withdraw support for Caedus when Tahiri Vela, who Caedus had been training as his Sith apprentice, killed the 90-year-old Grand Admiral and ensured that the Moff Council continued to support Caedus. It wasn't until a very unexpected event occurred that the tide of the battle turned, when the long-thought dead Natasi Dala, who Pelion had contacted before his death, and her irregular fleet forced Kaitis' severely decimated fleet to withdraw, and she hired Boba Fett and a company of Mandalorians to retake Pelion's flagship from Kaitis and Tahiri. With Niathal joining the Jedi Coalition, Kaitis made it his top priority to locate the secret Jedi base, capturing Hapan Prince Isolder, and during an assault on Nickel 1 and the Roche system that Jaina was helping defend as part of the Mandalorians' defense pact with the Verpine, Kaitis managed to create a Sith blood trail from the blood spattered on Jaina when she took off his arm during their brief lightsaber duel. This technique used by the Night Sisters of Dathomir helped Kaitis track the Jedi base to Shedu Mad in the Transitory Mists, where Jedi stealth X-Wings mobilized to engage the GA fleet. However, his plans would hit a snag when the Moff Council, going a little hard on creating nanoviruses after successfully seeding Manda-LORE with a Fett-targeting nanovirus, created one from Isolder's DNA to target Tenel Ka, and hopefully knock the Hapans out of the fight. During the climactic space battle in the Transitory Mists, he attempted to keep the virus from reaching Tenel Ka and Alana, and pleaded to Isolder to warn them if he released him. But the skeptical Hapan Prince spat in his face instead, and the frantic Kaitis killed him. The arrival of his twin sister aboard his flagship was his undoing, and the evenly matched siblings slugged it out, trading lightsaber blows and Sith lightning before Jaina finally landed the killing blow on Kaitis. And in a last act of desperation, Kaitis, or perhaps now Jacen Solo once more, reached out to Tenel Ka in the Force to warn her before succumbing to his wounds. On Shedu Mad, Ben was able to convince Tahiri to surrender to the Jedi, as Luke and his team boarded the Anakin Solo and forced Kaitis' fleet to surrender. And after hours of uncertainty, Tenel Ka emerged, but without her daughter Alana, whose death was staged to protect her, and she went into her grandparents' custody, who adopted her as the Hapan war orphan Amelia, so she could safely study at the Jedi Academy. With Kaitis and Pelion both dead, the Moffs were punished for their actions by being forced to set up a charitable organization to help war-torn worlds and other planets in need of aid, culminating in the creation of the Imperial Mission, which will be important in my next and final transmission in this series, and Jagged Fel was appointed to head of state of the Imperial Remnant. Though Kaitis was defeated, the Confederation capitulated, and the Galactic Alliance was made whole again, this would not be the last of the galaxy's troubles, as former Imperial Admiral Natasi Dala was elected to the office of Chief of State of the GA, and the Sith meditation sphere that Ben had found on Ziost traveled to the planet Kesh that I mentioned in Part 3 of this series, and contacted a lost tribe of the original Sith Empire from the end of the Great Hyperspace War. An even greater threat emerged in the form of Abeloth. The malevolent celestial that I had mentioned all the way back in Part 1 of this series had awoken, and sought to free herself from the prison made for her in the Maw Black Hole Cluster. In 43 ABY, Han, Leia, and Alana, now Amelia, embarked on an adventure to track down all of the previous owners of the Millennium Falcon, in doing so, helping an ex-smuggler who had been in a coma since the end of the Clone Wars recover a priceless artifact on Tandon 3. Abeloth's awakening began to have some adverse effects on the Jedi, as a few of them, mainly younger Padawans and Knights, two of whom were Korand and Mirax Horn's own children, began to experience paranoid delusions, thinking that everyone in their lives were replaced with imposters, and in some cases tried to attack and even kill their peers, prompting Chief of State Dala, who was already not a fan of the Jedi given their tumultuous history, to take action against the Order, placing great restrictions upon them and their ability to operate and respond to crises. Luke Skywalker was made to answer for all of the galactic events that were both directly and indirectly caused by the Jedi, and was forced to exile for 10 standard years, while Master Kent Hamner took over as the interim Grand Master. Luke and Ben would go on to try to figure out what influenced Jacen's fall to the dark side, bringing them to the Barando Sages of Doran and the Ang-Ti monks in the Cathal Rift, where he came into contact with a mysterious relic called the Codex, which amplified his presence in the Force. The lost tribe of the Sith, who had not yet finished building their armada, felt Skywalker's presence and recognized him as a threat to their plans, devoting all of their effort to eliminating him, discovering Abeloth in the process, who they collaborated with. But their first plan failed, and only one Sith apprentice, Vistara Kai, survived the ambush on Luke and Ben Skywalker and fled to Dathomir. Following an altercation on Dathomir, the Lost Tribe, who had become wary of Abeloth after seeing through her guise, proposed a temporary alliance with the exiled Grand Master to join forces and defeat her, and after unwittingly instigating a slave revolt on Tatooine, and as a result much of Hutt space in general, with the help of Lando Calrissian, they journeyed to the Maw. The Sith and the Jedi battled the eldritch abomination that was Abeloth. However, it was soon revealed that the Sith merely planned to use Skywalker as bait so they could capture the entity and use her power. But Luke appeared to land the killing blow, foiling the Lost Tribe's plan, and Jaina managed to hold the Lost Tribe off long enough for Luke, Ben, and their loyal companions to escape. Back on Coruscant, the rest of the Jedi had been dealing with Dalla's anti-Jedi campaign, suffering constant surveillance by the government-appointed observers, fending off an attack by her hired Mandalorian commandos as they effectively besieged the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, as well as a trial for Tahiri Vela's war crimes, all while the Jedi legal team petitioned the courts to lift the restrictions, but to no avail. Further tensions between Grandmaster Kent Hamner and the rest of the Jedi Council arose in the midst of galaxy-wide slave revolts, where Hamner made secret dealings with some of Dalla's cronies to keep the Jedi from supporting the freedom-seeking slaves, in return for all restrictions being lifted from the Order, and he was so blinded by this that he ended up being killed in a scuffle with Master Saba Sebetine, who took over as interim Grand Master as supported by the Jedi Council. Dalla was eventually ousted and imprisoned, and while new elections for Chief of State were being held, a triumvirate made up of Senator Hydent Treen, General Marat, and Acting Grand Master Sebetine oversaw the Galactic Alliance as well as Dalla's trial, which never occurred, due to Boba Fett breaking her out of prison in exchange for her helping him destroy the nanovirus keeping him from returning to Manda-LORE. Just as Luke Skywalker had feared, Abeloth was not actually dead. She merely transferred into another host body after Luke destroyed her first, which was coincidentally his former girlfriend Callista Ming, and proceeded to destroy the Lost Tribe's capital city on Kesh, many of whom sided with Abeloth, including Vistara's own father, who she'd be later forced to kill in a duel before aiding Luke and Ben. As Luke Skywalker returned as Grand Master of the Jedi Order and parted with the Galactic Alliance for good, relocating the Order to Ossus, Abeloth and several members of the Lost Tribe infiltrated Coruscant, and after killing her opposition, she, in the body of Senator Rokari Kem, was elected to the position of Chief of State, revealing herself not long after, and stylizing herself as the beloved Queen of the Stars, as she began to seize total control of the galaxy. The Jedi, aided by GA forces under Admiral Gavin Darklighter, the Hapans, and the Coruscant Security Force, launched a retaliatory strike to liberate Coruscant from Abeloth and the Lost Tribe, culminating in a climactic clash of sabers within the Jedi Temple, as had not been seen since the Great Galactic War 3,000 years earlier, as Abeloth herself erupted Coruscant's dormant volcanoes that had not erupted since the ancient Battle of Zell before the planet's technoscaping. During the battle, Abeloth split herself into multiple parts, one of which went into the Jedi Temple's computer core and was destroyed by Saba Sebetine, the other was eliminated by Boba Fett and Tahiri Vela on Hagamore 3, and the third was destroyed by Ben and Vistara on Abeloth's planet within the Maw cluster. Meanwhile, Luke entered a deep state of meditation called Mind Walking that he learned from the Mind Walkers of Sinkhole Station during his exile, and dueled Abeloth at the metaphysical Lake of Apparitions in the realm beyond shadows. Luke received help from an unlikely source, as a dark man, not one from the Lost Tribe but definitely not a Jedi, and suspected to be the dark man from Luke's visions during the Second Galactic Civil War, helped him defeat Abeloth at the Lake of Apparitions. Little did he know, this was Darth Krayt, who saw Abeloth as a hindrance to his One Sith movement, and endeavored to destroy her. With all of Abeloth's physical and metaphysical iterations seemingly destroyed, the remnants of the Lost Tribe were hunted down and defeated on Coruscant. When Dorvin was elected to the Chief of State's office of the GA, Jagged Fel was voted out as head of state of the Imperial Remnant in favor of Vitor Rage, and Jaina and Jagged were wed aboard Tenel Ka's Hapen Battle Dragon. The Jedi would remain a separate entity from the GA, however, after anti-Jedi sentiments fueled a vote in the Senate to keep them from reintegrating with the Galactic Alliance. No matter, as Luke's attention turned to making sure Abeloth could never return, which it seemed like she would given some disturbing reports. In 45 ABY, Luke, acting on a story that Yoda had told him during his training on Dagobah, which I have no reliable historical evidence to verify the validity of, so I assume it was just that, a story, regarding his father and Obi-Wan struggling against a group of Celestials called the Ones on a space monolith called Mortis during the Clone Wars, made it the Order's highest priority to find an alleged dagger capable of killing one of these Celestials, which would first require him to find the fabled Mortis. While embarking on their quest to find the monolith, Luke and Ben found themselves aiding Han, Leia, Lando, and Alana in stopping two Kalumai brothers from conducting an economic takeover of the entire galactic economy, and thus owning everything. And they too sought the monolith, but only for its supposed ability to turn non-Force sensitives into Force users. They found a monolith with a similar appearance to the fabled Mortis, but as soon as the brothers attempted to enter the monolith via a portal, one disintegrated and the other was killed by Leia. Ultimately, Luke deduced that the monolith they found wasn't Mortis, but a similar structure built by the Celestials. Nevertheless, it was cordoned off to prevent anyone else from suffering the same fate as the Kref brothers. Whether Luke ever ended up finding the alleged monolith and thus the supposed dagger is unknown, as records of the quest and ultimately the heroes of Yavin themselves abruptly end after this. However, since Abeloth never appears in the records again and is currently not a problem, it's safe to assume that Luke and the Jedi at least found some tangible way to ensure that Abeloth never returns to plague the galaxy. This would not be the end of the galaxy's troubles, however, as a whole new set of challenges await a new host of heroes in a vastly changed galaxy. But this is a subject for my next and final transmission in this series.
This ends my findings on the early Legacy era. Stay tuned for the next transmission of this lecture series, where the late Legacy era will be discussed. Special thanks to my Ori-Ramakad tier patrons, 2100 AB, Batarai, Bowfix, Bradetsky, Kabur, Hawk2274, Ian Waller, Jalil, John Hollingsworth, Carl Scarata, Kian Kier, Lieutenant Maverick 2, Matt Patton, Moonman, Nikhil Curran, Noah Shane 45, Wirefox Terrier, Zim the Despot, Zyzer, and Zexend. If you'd like to support this channel, please visit my Patreon to find out how. Link is in the description. In the meantime, keep your comm channels open for future transmissions, and don't forget to subscribe. Tad Larkin, out.